Hello and welcome to the Chorosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. Comments and have conversations there. This is episode 284. Is the ensemble model outdated? With Kevin Droe. I've said for a long time that music education is at a crossroads, philosophically, but depending on who you ask, we are either evolving in the right direction or we're missing the point entirely. Are traditional school music programs like band, orchestra, and choir reaching enough students? And if not, why? What number should we be reaching? There's a growing narrative in music education right now that what we've been doing for decades just isn't working anymore. My guest today, Kevin Droe, makes that case in a recent TED Talk, arguing that if we don't rethink school music programs, we risk losing students altogether. Now, I want to say this up front, that Kevin's not coming at this from the outside. He's a music education professor, a band director, and someone who clearly believes in music education and doing what's right for kids. And I think that matters to start out this conversation. But I also think some of the assumptions and claims in his TED Talk needed to be examined and questioned a little bit more carefully, so I invited him on. Now, to his credit, he knew I disagreed with some things and didn't run away. He came anyway. And just a hint for those choir director colleagues who I invite on under the pretense of some small disagreement or some large disagreement who decline coming on. So to Kevin's credit, this is a really exciting conversation because we find common ground among the disagreement. So some of those points that we hit is 20% participation in high school music really a crisis, or actually a sign that we're doing pretty darn well getting that high of a percentage when music is an elective? Are we excluding students by what we program at school, or are we just not offering every single possible pathway? And what does meaningful expansion within music education really look like in limited time and resources in school settings? So this conversation is honest, respectful, and at times a little challenging. So stick with it all the way to the end. And then weigh in over at the Chorosophy's Facebook page. And of course, you can also head over to the Substack, which seems to now be more popular in terms of collecting comments and conversation. So you can subscribe there for free, chorosophy.substack.com. Your music program or event deserves a platform that does it all, without the extra costs. With Ludus, you get seamless ticketing, built-in marketing, powerful fundraising, and volunteer management, where volunteers can sign up, schedule shifts, and track hours with ease. Need to sell merchandise and concessions in person? Ludus Retail lets you log sales by each group, track inventory, keep everything organized. Hosting music lessons or theater camps? They have a classes feature, which makes registration and student tracking effortless. And it's free for your organization. Thousands of programs already trust Ludus because they help you focus on what matters most, the performance. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more, including auto-assessment for at-home assignments, no more grading them individually. They can be graded in the moment. So use the Chorosophy checkout code, Chorosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. A big shout out goes to the producers and Inner Circle over at the Patreon page. These are folks that are really dedicated to keeping the lights on here at this show. Venture Studios, Chandler Smith, Brian Long, Michael Herron, Kyle Peterson, Steve and Kathy Kakachik, David Kowalczyk, Max Jackson, Angie Schilling, Rebecca Chalk, RJ McCracken, Michael Shimp, and Kyle Siddons. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Kevin Droe. Kevin is a music education professor in Iowa and recently released a TED Talk, which I saw come across my feed, of course, because I see a lot of music education content. My algorithm is trained to show me all the most recent music education content online so that I can comment on it here. And I reached out to Kevin, and to his credit, he enthusiastically agreed to come on. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. Kevin, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on, Chris.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? So I said you're a music education professor from Iowa or in Iowa, but why don't you give us a little bit more of the background of kind of how you got started in music education all the way up to what you're doing now?
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks for having me on. And, when people see the TED Talk and they might see me with an electric guitar, they might think that like I grew up as a rocker, and could be furthest from the truth. I I grew up as a band kid. I grew up in Southern California, joined band in elementary school and did band all the way till I graduated and did jazz band. I loved marching band. I just loved all the bands. And I played saxophone. I went off to, I looked around Southern California for music ed programs and it didn't seem all that appealing. So, and Midwest was the place to go. Although Colorado isn't like considered the Midwest, but I went to Northern Colorado to study music education and got to learn how to teach from there and then taught band, in Colorado. And if you were to ask me back then, while I was teaching middle school band in Colorado, whether popular music education had any value at all, or if I ran into someone else that was thinking that popular music education was a good way of reaching kids, I'd be like, no, that person does not understand what music education is about. But that's where I was. That's where I was back then. But I left Colorado, went down to Florida for a few years, work on the doctorate. But I do remember going down there that the person who was in charge of music at the time, Cliff Madsen, he called me up and he said, "Are you a band guy, choir guy, string guy, general music guy? What are you?" And I was just like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the something guy. Like I want to do music ed. I want to learn more about music education. I want to study it as much as I can, learn as much as I can about all facets of music ed, and not just kind of drill down on one thing. And then I've landed a job here at the University of Northern Iowa. And when I came here, I was kind of music ed plus a band guy, conducted the bands. I still do a marching band in the summers out in Colorado. But over time, I started like looking into all the different things that music education can do and all the different, how grand and awesome music is. And that's what kind of got me going in, a different direction into areas like of popular music education. So in short, yeah, I'm not a rocker. Like I like it, but that was not my culture that I grew up with. That was kind of the other music when I grew up.
Right. That's awesome. Well, so one of the things that I'm interested in too, just from your story there, you said that the way you were or where you were when you started out, you would have been skeptical of some of the positions maybe that you put forward in your TED Talk. What was, I guess, what was your red pill? Like, what was your magic moment that kind of made you see things differently? Or was it gradual?
It was gradual. It was gradual. One of the red pills, and that's Matrix talk. Just in case anyone's like, what kind of pills are you talking about?
We're doing drugs.
One of them began with, I had to teach a class on developments and trends here at the university. Part of that, and that was like every 2 years. And part of that was, every 2 years, I just start digging into what are the latest trends in music education and what is developing. And this thing would come up almost every time. It's just like about rock bands and popular musicians and stuff like that. And it kept coming up and up and up. And so I was like, there's something going on here. And one summer I invited Lucy Green, who kind of started the scholarship on popular music. I invited her to be a guest in my class. And that's when I first learned about her research about the musical futures in the UK. And then about this thing called Little Kids Rock that's starting up. And the course that summer, I would keep asking other professors that I learned about and they're doing scholarship to come talk in the class. And that started it. And then on top of that, I started a program for performing arts and disabilities for children with disabilities, ages 5 to 18. It's modeled after Ball State's PRISM project. And the kids do music, they do art, they do dance, and they do drama. And when we started that up, the whole idea of these kids doing music it also became like, this is a way different way that kids do music than I was ever taught. And I need to make it inclusive to all these kids. Because if music is as awesome as we say it is, and I really believe it is, then it should be for everyone. And so when we have a girl who's paraplegic, no vocal cords, and she wants to do music, how do we get her to do music? So that really kind of changed my view of what music can be for people. And those kind of two things together really got me looking at different avenues and then looking into popular music education types of pathways.
Yeah. Okay, good. So How did the TED Talk come about? Is there a background there of how that idea got hatched?
I just applied for it. And,
Okay.
this is
Yeah.
it's something that I mean, it's something I'm passionate about, and when I teach about it, I work out in schools, when I'm working with teachers and doing workshops about. So they were coming to town, and they were, who wants to do a TED Talk? And so I was like, well, I'll throw my idea in there, something that
Yeah.
I've always wanted to talk about. And although it's popular music education, it's not popular. I teach in a school of music where we have a lot of traditions and classical and jazz and opera, and it may not be the most popular thing, although we call it popular music education. So I thought,
Right.
well, this might be a way to kind of talk about it more.
Yeah. Well, and I think that might be a good place to jump in actually, because that might be one of the sources of our disagreements that I have with some of the things that you presented in the TED Talk, but it also could end up being, I think, a difference in how we think about terms. So like the terminology itself. So for example, popular music in many places around the world throughout history has been, for the vast majority of the population, a consumer product. In other words, most people are the listener. It's never been true that popular music has been a thing where most people are the ones making the music. They're the ones listening to the music as a consumer of the music. And I think that's actually a good thing. That's a beautiful thing, that we need listeners, or else there would be no musician. Like that we need an audience. We need somebody to entertain. And so I would agree, like one of the things you said right away is like music should be for everyone. And I agree. I just think not everyone takes the same role in it. And that's also part of the community aspect of music making, is that we all have a different role in it. Just like we're not all the weaver, we're not all the basket maker, we are not all the blacksmith. Some of us are the consumer of the product, and some of us are the creator of it, and that's important. And so I think maybe when you say that popular music isn't as popular, that might be why. Maybe some people just want to listen. Thoughts?
Well, when we're talking about commercial music, I teach at a university, and there are universities that have commercial music programs, like Berkeley and Miami and Belmont,
Mm-hmm.
and many others where they do commercial music. And what I'm working on is like music education rather than commercial music education.
Sure.
Or rather than commercial music. And sometimes people be like, yeah, what you're doing, you start up a program for, commercial musicians. And, to be honest with you, in Cedar Falls, Iowa, we don't have a big commercial music scene, believe it or not, going on around here. But it's like, well, for some places, for having, for developing and training and educating commercial musicians, that's great. All to you, you can do that. That's not what I'm into. I'm rather into using the genres that the students know and popular music to be able to connect with them, and then have them develop through music that way. So sometimes people are like, well, you're just trying to train some future musicians to be pop stars and
Sure.
stuff like that. I was like, no, actually, like the same goal that I had when I was teaching band, where I was like, do you want them to be professional band musicians, ensemble musicians? And I was like, nope, that's was never the goal of my philosophy of music education. And the same is true for popular. The same thing. I was like, it's
Yeah.
for enjoyment of the time.
That totally makes sense, and I was about to say that's no different than how I feel about my choir students. They're some of them go on to become professional singers and and performers and stuff, but that's not why I teach it. That has absolutely nothing to do with why I teach the class. I think it's because it's good for them. It's their mind, their body, their spirit, all those things, and so I'm sure that's aligns with your philosophy, with the stuff you're advocating for. Correct?
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that would be my assumption. Okay, so I'm going to go into your TED Talk here. I've just pulled out some moments, and I just want to see what conversations they spark. So you start out the TED Talk with a little song. You're playing on your guitar, and you've got some little catchphrases in there that I want to see kind of unpack them a little bit. Music class is stuck in time, and it's same old tune, same old rhyme. You make it rhyme. It's real cute. I liked it. And basically, it's making a claim that traditional school music is no longer relevant to most students, and that it needs expansion through through modern band or other types of course offerings that you go on to talk about in that TED Talk. Is that a fair summary of kind of your opening?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Okay. I don't want to
when
put words in your mouth at any
oh
point.
no. Yeah, yeah. No, you're thinking. I was trying to think of the back in some of the clips of politicians where they're like, I didn't say like I'm using the exact same words you said,
Right.
but but no, you're right. And when you say most students, that's a big part of it because like the music systems that we have right now and the structures that we have right now, they are awesome for some kids, but not a lot of the kids in there. And so like when I look at the kids that were not coming into our music rooms, I want to be able to get those doors open for those kids to come in,
Right.
And it's like
Yeah.
how do we do that? Like we have awesome programs for a small section of our society, but it's like, okay, I know there's a lot of kids out there that love music. I mean, I get it. It's not 100%. There's statistically or scientifically, there are some people in our society that don't like music at all. I haven't met those people, but I heard they exist. But for that other large percentage, it's like I know they love music of some kind. How can we get them into our classrooms and be able to help them develop and learn music and be able to express themselves through music and learn more about music?
Right. Yeah, now one of the things that I noticed too in your opening line of that little song is that music education is stuck in time. And so my first thought there, it's a little bit of a pushback to that idea because I've been teaching for 23 years. Teaching in choir, of course, that's my area. Teaching choir is nothing like it was 23 years ago. Like it's changed so much just in the amount of time that I've been alive, and I'm sure that the people from the generation that taught before me would say the same thing over the course of the 30 or 40 years that they taught, that there was so much change in how music education was delivered. I know that the pedagogies have changed, the ideas around inclusion have changed. Our repertoire is way more diverse than it used to be. Like we're no longer performing the music of 18th century Europe. We're performing, like, I don't even remember the last time I heard Mozart at a convention. There's a ton of change happening. So I wonder if that is a little bit of a premise that I would push back on, maybe, is that it hasn't been changing. Thoughts?
Well, you're right, and it is changing. I mean, and it's evolving within that structure.
Sure.
Within those ensembles. I think that has been evolving. I think of like on the band side, just the percussion writing alone. If you looked at the music that was written for bands in the early '80s compared to now, and it's just like it's way different, right? And pedagogically, so true. The way that we train teachers now to be able to make the rehearsal room more inclusive for students and our approach as opposed to years ago. Yeah, I agree. Those things have changed. I think what hasn't changed is the structure of music classes at a school, being with the large group. And I love large groups and they are awesome, but I just have to look at it and go, but there are a lot of kids who aren't coming into those. How do we get those kids to come in? And if you were to see, back in the 70s where there were a lot of, I can't say electronic music, but, like rock band classes going on at schools is like, no one was doing that. But now we are starting to see like little by little those things coming out. It's just a little story. I was president of the Iowa Music Educators Association and during that time, one of the things we had to do, and anyone that's been in those roles knows, you go out to Washington, D.C. for Hill Day, and you talk to your state representatives. And it hit me that when I'm talking to these people, asking them to vote on this bill and that bill and support this, that there was like a 70 or 75% chance the person I'm talking to never did music in high school. And I was like, if they didn't do it then, why would they support it now? Like, what will change about them that they're going to support it now? And I thought, so when we talk about like what percentage of the kids at high school aren't doing music, that's another, you can also say that percentage of our society didn't do music in high school. Maybe they did it in middle school and stuff like that. But there's that big segment of our society, our lawmakers, our business owners, our teachers, our next door neighbors, like And so I was like, you know what? If we're going to get more people to support music and support the kids in school music and stuff like that, we got to find ways of getting that large part of our society into music classes.
Ensemble trips can be more than just a performance. They can build community, inspire artistry, and give students a reason to stay invested. That's why I recommend Kaleidoscope Adventures. For more than 30 years, Kaleidoscope has helped student groups travel with purpose, combining performance opportunities with experiences that deepen musical understanding and create lifelong memories. They'll help you find the right destination, the right venue, and the right balance of music, education, and fun. And they manage the planning from start to finish so you can focus on your job as an educator. To explore options for your choir, visit mykatrip.com or find the link in the show note. Yeah. So that's a really good framework there. And it sounds like your beef is that we don't get enough kids in secondary school. Let's just say secondary school, grades 7 through 12, to do music, do a music elective, and that 1 out of 5 is not enough. In which case, if that's the claim, I would agree. I think then the devil's in the details of what does it take to get more than 1 out of 5, and because that might be a disagreement. And then the second thing would be, why is 1 out of 5 low? I actually think it's incredibly high and it's successful. What in your and I'll share more about why I think that, but I'm interested with you first. Why is 1 out of 5 low, and what should it be in your mind?
Well, kind of going back to, a lot of people enjoy music and love music. And I think I'm kind of just a devotee to music, that it can really connect to people. It can help people. It can do a lot. It can do a lot for people. All those sayings about music cross-stitched on pillows, that I laughed at and snickered at, when I was younger. It's like, now I look at those and go, yeah, that's true. Music really can do that for you. And so the fact that they love music, and does that mean that they can also learn more about music, learn to do stuff in music? Like, are they musical? And can we help develop their musicianship from where they are to somewhere else? Can we bring them into a classroom so they can discover more of the joy about music and the struggles of music? Like, can we do that with more people? And I guess it's maybe my experience with our Spectrum project, working with students with disabilities. It's like they are very musical, and maybe they can't play a violin, or sing in tune, but they do have like musical energy in them that they want to express. So I believe that we can do a lot more. We can do a lot more to reach more people through music in our secondary schools.
Yeah. Now, I agree, of course, with that framing, that we can do more. And I'm always pushing to do more too. And I would say I'm also in the camp of a devotee to music education and believe in its power. I think I'm just going to kind of keep us on this percentage thing for a second, because I think it's a really important part of us understanding this issue. So, a couple things, and let's just see your reaction to it. In the United States, electives in secondary school, not everybody has to take them. That's by nature, right? So, visual art electives reach about 30% of all students, music about 20%. And of course, I've been around teenagers now my whole teaching career, and I know that there is a very large percentage of teenagers who will take the path of least resistance through high school. And I know, especially when it relates to, I want to do classes where my work won't be necessarily visible to others, because I'm insecure and shy, and I don't want to sing in front of people. I don't want to play an instrument in front of people, because then they would see me and hear me. And that is a big part of who high schoolers are. And they might be musical. They might absolutely be musical, but that's not actually enough. Like, there's a personality that also says, I'm willing to be musical in front of people. So that's part of it. And so then you look at other electives like theater, which is like 3 to 5% of all high school kids. Debate classes, 5 to 10% of all high school kids. Every other elective area dwindles in comparison to ensemble music and visual art, drawing, basically. And so in my way of looking at it, in the big picture of what classes get offered in high school, I think ensemble music is kicking ass, because we're getting kids not only 20% of the student body to do this, but also to do something that's unsafe socially, to get out in front of people and perform music as a beginner. I think we're doing great. That does not mean I don't think we should get more kids, because I do. I don't think we should. I don't like to frame it as like it's like a failure. Thoughts?
So you're definitely not saying like we're capped. We're not.
No,
We don't
no,
want to take
definitely
any
not
more
saying
kids.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. And I agree. I will say that not all music has to be performance music. Like all music classes
agreed.
don't have to be performance. And that's
Yeah,
something
sure.
like we teach about guitar class here to our students. And that's something that if they've never been in a guitar class, it might be kind of weird for a music education major to realize that guitar classes never perform, never put on, like they mostly they learn about guitar, they learn how to play it, they learn all this, but they rarely like will go and do, okay, our guitar class is going to put on a concert. Some of them do, and that's great, but others are like they're going to learn guitar and that's it. So the performance aspect isn't, it's not something that has to be necessary for someone to learn musicianship and to learn more about music in that way. It's the same as like in a digital music class or a music production class or even a songwriting class where, like they may not have to perform in front of others to
Right.
still get that benefit of being in the music class.
I just noticed in your TED talk, the 1 in 5
Oh,
almost felt like evidence of a failure of a system,
well,
and I just don't see it that way.
yeah, and I would say first of all, music teachers, especially doing ensembles and things like that, they're working hard. They got big hearts. I mean, they are reaching as many kids as they can. And so I think you were kind of alluding to this, like how would you expand that? Right. I think maybe that's what you were kind of like wanted to
Hmm.
ask about is like if a teacher's already like you're teaching how many 200, 300 kids a day in your job, and to make a teacher who's doing that feel like, well, but you're not reaching the other, 3/4 of the school, so you're a failure. No, that's not what we like. They are doing as much as they can at that point. And sure, it would be easy to say, well, you just got to hire more music teachers. For someone who's in the job of preparing music teachers, like that's a great idea. Just hire more music teachers. But that's the reality of that is like almost improbable because
Sure.
administrators, you got a tight budget. The how staffing is at a school is usually about like 2 or 3 or 5 years behind the population movements within that community. They're always kind of lagging behind. Budgets are tight here in Iowa. Public schools even being cut, year after year. So to be able to say, well, let's just hire more music teachers is like probably not going to happen. But what we probably have to do is be able to kind of restructure how things are done. And even if we were to be able to get like more teachers in to teach, different courses and a more variety of courses, we still have to be able to have teachers feel prepared and feel ready to do those things. So it's not just a matter of like get more teachers in, but it's the preparation and then it's the structure. Like within the structure, if someone is teaching, 6 classes a day and they're all full, it's like, okay, that's maxed out. But are there any other places where other teachers are not maxed out, and we can be able to like restructure how their day looks to be able to add maybe just one little class, one not a full load, but maybe just be able to add in one class into that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's where our agreement would be, because I see a lot of the things that you suggested in that TED Talk as fantastic ways to get at the margins of the kids who are not connecting right away with the music ensemble courses that are offered, but might connect to a class like modern band. There's all kinds of things that I've seen in schools. Guitar class, you already mentioned. What I really wonder though is, um, let's just take modern band, since that's the one you talked about in your TED talk. Do you see that as a solution to reaching 50% of the student body, 75% of the student body, or is that an addition at the margins of those kids that don't want to take band, choir, or orchestra? How do you see that in your perfect world?
Yeah, I think it's one pathway. It's not. I think there was one person. It's like you just want to replace band, orchestra, and choir with modern band, don't you? I was like, Oh, heck no. That's the worst thing that I would never want a world like that. I think it's just one more pathway to be able to get there. I think the most important thing, probably the big picture, is like more variety of classes, you know,
Hmm.
than what's being offered in most schools. Like adding on maybe just one class, you might get, 60 more kids in a year, but you know, that's 60 more kids who have had any kind of music experience in high school at all. So it's definitely not like, like we got one little portion of kids having an awesome time in music, and modern band's going to do the rest of it. Nothing like that. But it's just one example of something that might be able to attract kids who would like drawn to that, or drawn to that way of
Right.
doing music.
Yeah, right now, for example, at my school, we're getting ready to do our end of the year variety show, which takes our choir kids. Some of our band and orchestra kids get involved, but it's a choir presentation, so it's mostly choir kids. And of course, they're bringing out all their talents of all their different musical expressions that they have, and many of them are incredible guitar players and rockers and rappers, and all these things are happening. And of course, they did that without me teaching them how to do that. These are, of course, popular styles, so they are learning them outside of school, and they're incredible. And they could go get paid to do them in bars. But we give them that avenue to do that. I think the concern, and this is where I think this conversation gets really sticky, because you mentioned it yourself, of those cut budgets and those administrators who have a tight leash on the programs, etc. I know that where I've taught in my life, if I went to administration with this great idea to do what this modern band idea, which I think is awesome, and it's such a cool thing that we could have for kids, but in a lot of places that conversation would be, oh, that sounds like a great idea. How many kids do you think you could fit in that class? And of course, most modern band classes are 12 to 18 kids, somewhere in there. And they would see how much it costs in comparison to a choir class. And they would see that I can get 60 in my choir class, one single section taught by one person. And then they would say something like, oh, that's a great idea. What are we going to cut? What are we going to do instead? What are we going to put that in there instead of? Which means we now have to cut an orchestra class. We now have to cut a band class. We now have to cut a choir class, which serves more people for less money. That's where I think these realities kind of stick in there. So what would be your answer to that solution?
Well, I cannot argue against the cost effectiveness of one teacher and 60 kids, or one teacher and 80 kids, or 100
Right.
kids. I think
Yeah.
I had a band class of 110, and it was just me.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
went to the principal and I said, we need to get someone else to come in and teach this. And he goes, well, let's just see how many kids actually show up on the first day. And I was like, even if 10% drop out than the registered, that's still 100 kids. Like, that's a lot. And that ratio, for teaching and learning, like, not a good ratio, right?
I agree.
Like, we want to be able to get that ratio down so that we can reach understand the kids and be able to connect with them that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't say like, and when you talk choir, I mean, like, what's your instruments you need for choir? Like, I get it. That's a cheap class,
Yep.
for that, But modern band, or a class like modern band, or guitar class or something like that, it's not really that expensive compared to, having to do orchestra classes and band classes, a set of timpani being $20,000 or something like that. Like, it's not super expensive. Some of my research has been with administrators. It's coming out in a journal pretty soon. Actually, it's online right now, but it's asking administrators what they think about these kinds of classes, like songwriting and modern band, stuff like that. One of the biggest findings is they don't really know about them. They didn't even know they could actually exist. And the second is, like, if they could offer them, they would probably like something like songwriting, something that, that incorporates writing and other disciplines. And third, they want to be able to get kids in music classes that are, disabilities and at risk. Like, they want to find those kids that are like really, they want to help these kids, and they see music as something that, they recognize that music can help lots of different kids, and they want kids in there. But going back to number one, they don't really know about it. So that, like when you said, like, go and talk to the principal and they're like, what's the cost effectiveness of it? Yeah, that is so true. And that's a real problem to work with. An example of a teacher just in a neighboring town near our university. She is a string teacher in a high school. She was teaching orchestra, and then the rest of her day, and I don't know if it's not like this in a lot of other states, but they taught lessons for the rest of the day. And so, like, 2 classes of orchestra, and then the rest of her day was teaching lessons. She went to the administrator and said, what if we were able to combine those into kind of little bigger group lessons? I could offer a guitar class. How about that? And about 6 years later, they now have like 3 levels of guitar. All of the music teachers there are teaching at least 1 or 2 sections of guitar. But what she did is she just restructured her schedule. Now, not all teachers have that flexibility. If you have full classes and you're getting a lot of kids coming through the door, that's awesome. That's working. Don't change that at all. But are there any places where we can be able to provide some kind of revisions, some kind of modifications to be able to figure out how to get more variety of offerings for kids?
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I think that's really well said, and I think that's where we would find most of our agreement is thinking about like in what situations, which is why I used the term at the margins earlier. It's like in what situations and in what places can we make those types of those classes that you're talking about feel safer for teachers to just jump in and try. And recently, I mentioned before we started recording that Shane Calhoun was on the show recently, and he's a big advocate for modern band and alternative modes of music education. And this is what we talked about too, where sometimes current music education training doesn't really help people like me feel prepared to teach those types of classes. And so that's its own barrier where I might want to add something like that. For example, we're trying to rewrite the curriculum for my music appreciation class, and which is great, and I think it should change. And there's other things that we can do to serve those kids. But at the same time, I was taught to teach choir. Like that was all I was trained to do 100% of the time. And that's what I want to do. I do believe that choir is the most inclusive of any kind of music class because it's cheaper. In other words, like there are less barriers to entry, and everyone comes with a voice. We've been using it musically since we were born, and we can teach any genre pretty much, and that kind of thing. And so I believe in what I do. I think it's powerful, and I think it reaches a lot of kids. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, and this was kind of in the TED Talk also, is I believe that exactly the same thing. And when we have music education students, or they're high school graduates, and they're coming to our universities, and I meet them, and I will talk about popular music education as one of the methods, in our classes. And rather than me going to be like trying to, hey, you should think about teaching some popular music, doing a DJing class. You should teach a songwriting, when the student came to our university because they wanted to teach band, right? So I'm like, you want to teach band? That's awesome. Band is awesome to teach. We're going to show you how to teach band, And for me to maybe come to you and like, hey, shouldn't you be teaching choir is just the same as me coming to you going, hey, you know what, Chris, you should teach band, because I know choir's okay, but band is actually better. And you're like, no, I love choir. I want to teach choir. So I'd like what people are teaching, and they're teaching it because they love to teach it. And we keep doing that. And we have students coming to us who want to teach those things. That's awesome. What I'm hoping we can do is kind of open up another door in music education for those people who are like, you know what, I love music. I'm playing guitar. I've been writing songs. I've been making beats, and I love working with kids, and I do summer camps and stuff like that. Can I be a music teacher? And I was like, we should be able to have a way for them to access music education to do that, and not be expecting like what we're doing right now is expecting a band director to turn into a modern band teacher, or a choir teacher to turn into an electronic. Like that's what we're doing right now. And kudos to them who are kind of like, oh, okay, I'll try doing that, because it's scary to do those things. But no one should be expected to like go off from there. Like you love teaching that kind of music that you're doing, and we should support that as much as we can. But how can we get other people who can also come in and provide some variety? That's what I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and I think that's also really well said, and that squares with me. I also think too, there's probably a bigger number than maybe a lot of the universities' music education programs, a bigger number of students there than they might even realize that would also have competencies in popular music styles. Because, like I said, my kids that are at choir, we don't teach them how to play the guitar at school. There is no guitar class at my school, but I've got some incredible guitar players, but they sing in choir, they play in band because they're musical. And I wonder too, this might be a framework difference with how we're thinking about it. So I want to take this all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. And you said something about how so many kids at schools are musical and they're not in music classes. And I totally agree with that. However, I think I see three groups of people where you might see two groups of people. And so you tell me if I've said this wrong. So I think that because I agree with you that a very tiny percentage of the human population does not like music at all.
That's what I've been told. I don't know. That's what I've read in research.
I've read that too.
I haven't met them, but I hear they exist. That's all.
Oh, I've met some of them. They go to my church. Like they don't care about it. They don't care to listen to it. They don't care to talk about it. They don't care to be involved in it. It just doesn't mean anything to them. That's a pretty small percentage of the population, though. The rest of the population is musical in a sense, but that does not mean they all want to or feel led to make music. This is that third group of people. So I think there are people who don't care about music. I think there are music consumers and there are music makers. There are three different groups of people. Some people really just want to be listeners. They love to listen. They have no interest in playing. They have no interest in singing. They just want to sit and listen to the songs, and they enjoy the songs. They feel led by the songs, but they don't want to be the one making them. And then there's another group of people who enjoys making the music. And so I think in our classes at school, like for the most part, we're teaching kids that are part of that third group of people who want to be music makers. Thoughts?
Well, what was your first group? You had said
the first group is the people that just don't like music.
Oh, just don't like, yeah, okay.
But they're a small group.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying as far as there might be people out there that don't want to do anything to try to make music. I could see that. Probably how I would probably approach it is that since, they're young, they're adolescents and, and still in school, maybe they can have an opportunity to try out different ways of making music. And maybe we discover different kinds of musicianship that we didn't know before. They're not just with kids, but I've also done projects with senior citizens in rock bands. It's called Rock in the Ages, and it was really fun. And there were some people there where, they'd always heard rock and roll, but they've never tried it. And it was just part of a research project, and they kind of picked up a bass and played some keyboards and got to play some Buddy Holly and Elvis and stuff like that. But I don't think they ever saw themselves as ever being in a band like that, making that kind of music. But it was enjoyable. They didn't continue doing it as a rock band, but they enjoyed it at that one time. But yeah, I'm sure there are people who are just like, I never want to try to make the music myself. Maybe it's like some singers are like, I can't sing and I never want to sing. And probably from your point of view, you're like, I don't know about that.
You just never took my class.
Yeah, he did. Right. Exactly. Like someone's like, I'm just not a singer. It's like really kind of hard to believe that, I know, like, from my experience, like, our problem in school music necessarily isn't that we have too many people who think they can sing or play instruments, but they're just not good enough. Like, we don't have enough people who think they can do it, who think they can, play that instrument, who think they can sing, who think they can write a song, who think they can be creative. Like, we want to be able to have those opportunities for them. We want them to feel like that is a possibility, that there is a place for them to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, because I think in that answer that you just gave, you might have uncovered a area of where you and I will probably both really agree, which is because you mentioned at the beginning of that response that maybe if we got to them in their adolescence in a certain way, they would have discovered some aspect of their musicianship that made them believe that they could make music. And so maybe that group of people, that we're just missing them, like we're just But I think maybe where we're missing them is not secondary school music when music is an elective. I think we're missing them younger. And because and this is be my hot take, and I want to see how you feel about this hot take, but I think one of the worst things that we do in music education is we make mandatory music for all elementary kids. And here's why I think that's a bad thing. Because the reality of how it ends up happening is that every kid gets music. They're told they're getting music training, music education at school, but it's really like 45 minutes twice a week. And that's not enough to actually learn how to be good at music. And so then they grow up their whole life thinking, "Oh, I tried music in elementary school. I was bad at it." And so they're told that, like, they're told by adult professional music teachers that they're getting music training. But the system sets them up with an impossible task, which is to teach every single kid in the school to be good at music. And then most of them don't become good at music, obviously, because you need more time than that. So then they grow up their whole life telling everybody that they're not a singer, they're not a player, and then they never take music in high school.
That is such a good point. I never really looked at it that way. When you mentioned, like, you get like once every 4 days for a half hour or 45 minutes, it's like, who does music that way? Like, who does it
Only
so
Americans.
That's right. For it to be required. Yeah, I mean, I grew up without elementary music at all. We'd
Oh,
have
wow, really?
Southern California at the time. Now, as of last year, they do have elementary music, I think, but we didn't have any elementary music. They had band once a month or something like that, and that's what I joined, but we didn't have an elementary music teacher or a PE teacher or an art teacher. We just had a teacher, and that's all we had. But
Responsible for the whole student body.
yeah,
Yeah, it's insane.
now when you were talking about that required music and the structure it's like, and I'm married to an elementary music teacher who teaches music every day, and they are hardworking teachers, and they got the biggest hearts. But that
Yep.
structure, just like in the other ways we structure things, when you put it that way, it's like, yeah, how does that make you feel like a musician? The research also would back what you said about not feeling like a musician after elementary school. And if you're not feeling
Yep.
like a musician, then what are the chances you're going to do an elective in middle school or junior high when you're not feeling like you have been successful in music?
Right. No, I think that's a big part of the problem that you and I are both passionate about trying to solve, which is that we want more kids to be getting music education. And we both want that. I think the problem starts earlier. I think that's the big thing. And so, for example, in my school district about 5 years ago, a colleague came to me because some policy was going to change in our district. And this colleague said to me, "Oh, it's great news. It's great news. Every single sixth grader is going to have choir. They're going to get a vocal music class, every single sixth grader, and the teacher's going to see them for 7 weeks." And I said, "Oh no, that is the worst thing that you could possibly do. You're going to tell them that they had choir, but they only got to do it for 7 weeks, which means that they will all have been told that they tried it and they didn't become good at it, obviously, because it takes more than 7 weeks to learn how to sing well."
And was that
And
required? Was that
it's
required?
required for all.
Required.
It's required for all. So it's inclusive,
Yeah.
right? But it teaches them that they're bad at it. And so then they don't do it in high school anymore. And then 5 years later, our numbers are in the tank.
Yeah, I could see how there could be a lot of challenges with that. When we talk about going back to elementary music, I agree. I think there is a lot of ways we can restructure elementary music. I know that we have, Orf Kodai. Actually, it was a good episode on Kodai with the Texas Music Educators. I really enjoyed that episode. So if you're listening, go back and listen to that one, because that is some
Okay,
great
thank you.
ideas.
Thanks for the plug.
Some ideas came out in that one, and to do it with Kodai educators, which my wife is one as well here in Iowa. But we are talking about a pedagogy, curriculum, approach, method, whatever you'd like to call it, that's 100 years old, and when we're thinking about music and how it's changed over time, some of the ways that we're teaching, or I say we, but maybe I'm just kind of generalizing to elementary schools across the nation, is that like we may not have taken the philosophy that was originally started with back then, and we're using that philosophy today. We're kind of more using the exact curriculum today. I think you mentioned the idea of folk songs, that people don't know at all, and trying to get them to learn them. But integrating, restructuring elementary music, obviously more often, but, we here in Cedar Falls, Iowa, that they do modern band in the elementary schools with their kids, and they're finding it to be a successful way to reach kids and have them connect through music. And so yeah, it's at all levels, really, we could use some help restructuring that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another area of agreement, maybe we can kind of wrap up with this, is that, and you mentioned it too, out of that Kadai episode, where one of my criticisms, I guess, of the field is that we're taking the idea from 100 years ago, and we're in many cases we're still using the songs from 100 years ago but then we're missing the point. The whole point of that idea was that these are songs that kids had in their heads. And if they don't have them in their heads, then the whole point is gone, which is that we're taking that audiation ability that kids have and teaching them to translate it into notated music, into playing the instrument, into singing, all those things, and then teaching them to apply those skills to other things. And so that part is critical. And so this is where the popular music can be an avenue into their broader music literacy, which I also agree with, and I think that's important. However, I also think that we have to serve their broader perspective at some point. And so I wonder too, if the long-term solution, if you and I both had a magic wand and we could make all the things we both think are important for music education just be true, I wonder if the solution isn't that we have like classical music education training, and then we also have popular music education training. I wonder if the solution is that we have less focus on, I'm a band guy, I'm a choir guy, I'm an orchestra guy, and more focus on, I'm a music teacher. And I might have a primary instrument, but I'm a music teacher first. Thoughts?
Oh, yes, and yes. I think, and I specialized in band. You specialized in choir. But what I'm discovering more, especially as my research lately has been out in rural schools, small schools most of the school districts in Iowa are rural schools. And if they had more of a generalist as a music educator, more of someone who is a music educator and not just a band person, a choir, which again, I would not have agreed with when I was going through school to be able to do that. But if they had someone that could more is like, I'm a music educator, then they would be a lot more success out in those schools trying to get kids into the music class. Because when we specialize in one thing, and it's really fun to specialize in one thing, I get that, but that specialization may not be attracting all, as many kids as we could possibly get into the schools. Like something like modern band, one of the best teachers I've ever seen teach modern band out in Fort Collins. She's not a guitar player. She's not a bass player. She's not a drummer. Like she can't do all those, but she knows how to facilitate it. Like she knows how to structure the instruction to allow kids to do that. And just like you were saying with that kid on guitar that's doing the variety show, Chris, one thing you didn't do was like, oh, you're playing guitar? Get out of here. Like, we're not going to let that in. And like, no, you were welcome. I'm sure you're welcoming that in to be a part of this whole thing. So, like, you're providing that structure to be able to happen. Being able to facilitate that is a great teaching skill. But when we just specialize, then we can kind of start excluding kids from a really great thing called music. I got censored. Okay, I think that's it. Okay. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It was a great talk and wonderful questions. You really kind of dig deep into a lot of great things. And so I really appreciate those questions. They were really fun to talk about. And I've learned a lot of stuff. I just, broadened my horizons for how I think about music and having conversations like this. Thanks. I think there's a big benefit for us to be able to prepare future music teachers to be more of a generalist rather than a specialist. With my research in rural schools where you may have one music teacher, lucky if you have two music teachers, but you have all these different kinds of students there, lots of different kinds of music interests. When we specialize, and it's fun to specialize, that you can dig deep into your art form and how to do that. That's great, but you might be like excluding some kids who, don't do that. If you can be able to be more of a music educator, like you said, you're teaching music, not necessarily I'm teaching band or I'm not, teaching orchestra, but I'm about teaching music. then maybe that opens up opportunities for future classes that you didn't even think about. Maybe you have, maybe you're in a community where there's a lot of ukuleles, and then you're like, well, maybe we'll start opening up some ukulele classes here. So I think that the idea of a generalist, I think that is underappreciated. I think that is actually a great way of changing music education to be able to meet more kids.
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree. Yeah, that's a great way to finish this conversation. It's been really rich, Kevin. I appreciate it. Sorry about the technical glitch there towards the end, but I think people are going to really enjoy this, and I think that people will also maybe see how within their own individual programs there is still always value, regardless of how it's structured. There's always value of figuring out ways to wrap in and make kids feel like their individual music expressions have value and have a place, which I think we would both agree on as well.
That's great. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a blast.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was just, I mean, I've listened to the podcast before, and then when you reached out to me, I was thinking, but I'm not a choral director. He's asking me to be on the Choralosophy podcast? Like, really? Like, maybe he got the wrong
Because I'm a music.
Because exactly. And that's what comes across in your podcast, and I hope everyone listening understands that too, that you're really going for learning and be able to help music and music education as much as possible. And so I really appreciate what you're doing with the podcast. Okay. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code, and of course now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.